So basically, this is more than a book of recipes. Culinary Tales of Balochistan, Culinary Tales from Balochistan is part memoir and part ode to Nilofar's province, Balochistan, from her paternal side. Balochistan is where my paternal family comes from. Every recipe in this collection is anchored in a food story. So prior to the book, Nilofar had made a web series called Pakistan on a Plate. And there were around 54 episodes on her YouTube channel called Nilofar's Corner, without the apostrophe, Nilofar's Corner. And if you haven't been on that channel, please do subscribe if you haven't already. And so this is her first book from the series. The fact that Nilofar started off her book series from Balochistan is very telling with regards to a connection to the place. It's almost as if it's like a metaphorical journey starting from home. Nilofar's actually traveled the whole length and breadth of Balochistan, and it's truly a labor of love. I'm a witness to that because I saw it from its nascent stage, the middle, and its fruition, and very proud of you, sis.
Thank you.
So I think this cover from the book is you in Gwadar.
Actually, it's Las Vela.
It's Las Vela, okay, all right. So let me start off with, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions and we'll have a back and forth conversation.
Sure.
So Nilofar, call her Nino, how did you conceptualize your web page, and then how did you transition from that, from your web series to web series Pakistan on a Plate to this book? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. Thank you, Maha, and thank you so much, all of you, for coming. I mean, it's a stormy day and it's a weeknight, so thank you so much. As Maha pointed out, this has been a very long journey. And the journey in terms of publication, I've launched in England, but it truly didn't feel as if I had really launched because it's a Pakistan on a Plate series and underlying Pakistan. So this is the first event I'm having in Pakistan. So I'd like to thank the Asian Study Group and the team for launching, frankly, Culinary Tales of Balochistan in Pakistan for me. This is a long time coming. In 2010, we had a horrendous flood which destroyed many lives and many places in Pakistan. And as a result of that, I had an opportunity to travel to parts lesser traveled by many. And one of the things that always has fascinated me in a better understanding a place or people is food. And my experience when I was in Sindh and in Balochistan, parts of Balochistan where I'm not familiar with, I realized that the local culinary was unavailable in the public spaces. When I mean public spaces, I mean the dhabas, the restaurants, the little motels. The kind of food that I was enjoying was generic, the stuff that you have in GT Road, and it kind of annoyed me because, there would be weeks and weeks and weeks where, we'd be in the field and I'd be eating the same food, but I'm in a very interesting province. And instinctively, I knew that there's this whole world of culinary and traditional food which is hidden. And the metaphor sort of kind of, really exploded in my mind that something so personal and so indicative of who we are as a people and what our traditions are and what heritage is that we are linked to over centuries, over even contemporary to, for that matter, the reflection of your agriculture, the reflection of your socio-economic conditions is completely, invisible. And hence the idea, the seed for the Pakistan on a Plate started. Okay. So as Maha pointed out, I have 54 episodes from across the 100 districts in Pakistan, which I traveled. We have 154 districts, maybe 153. That depends how we define our lines these days. But I have been to quite a lot of Pakistan, and when COVID hit in March 2020, I had an opportunity to sort of stop and then take that knowledge and start thinking about the books. The books were always going to be part of the journey. And it was kind of obvious where I would start. As Maha said, Balochistan is my paternal hometown. And there was so much I was very keen to learn and explore myself. So the book is a lot of our family, the Qazis of Balochistan and the Afridis of Balochistan as well. And they are odes to invisible chefs, invisible histories, invisible food, and what does that tell you from my perspective? So I think...
Yeah, that's quite comprehensive. So, Niloufar, can you tell us what does the word Baloch mean? You've mentioned it in your book. I also had another take to that, but what is the word? Let's start off with what it means.
There's no one meaning. At least the two top definitions that I was told by various Baloch is the head of, the rooster's crown. And so the rooster and the crown, so the crown of the rooster, that's one. Mm-hmm. And then you have also the system of sitting together, like what we would say in Pashto, the jirga, like how you would sit together as equals. So that process is also known as Baloch, like a communal gathering as well. So which is an indication of the tribe, like the community of, which holds together. They have a similar identity. These are the two names or the definitions of what is called Baloch.
You also mentioned the connection with Shams, Syria, how the Baloch see themselves as having a connection or ancestry with Syria, with Shams, and who used to worship the ancient god Baal.
The book explores where the stories from the community imagine where they come from. And there are multiple versions. You've mentioned one, and as I said, this book is an exploration of the province and people as they see themselves. Right. And so one of the stories is that the community, their origins are Arab from Syria, and then their forefathers then through post Karbala came and then, settled. So mythology doesn't have, the timelines that historians would perhaps judge upon. But there are multiple theories and there are multiple local mythologies. Mm-hmm. And so through the poetry of the Baloch, through the folklore of the Baloch, I have pieced together and quoted, which folklore indicates what. And similarly, I have done that with the Pukhtuns of Baloch as well.
Okay. So Niloufar, what is Balochi food?
Okay. I think what you mean is what constitutes Balochistan food, because again, Balochi is an ethnic group, and this is sometimes, like people use this very loosely, but Balochistan is an amalgamation of many cultures and many traditions and many ethnic groups. So the culinary tradition of Balochistan has three fundamental elements: KRUT, which is dried milk, fermented milk, and then it's dried and dehydrated, and then it's rehydrated as an ingredient in many recipes. You have dried meat, which we call LANDHI, but in the coastal areas, it's called tabahik, where they cure the meat with pomegranate powder, salt but pomegranate powder. And the third, dodeh. The variety of bread is second to none in Balochistan, aside from the incredible taste. So these three elements become the foundational culinary culture of Balochistan. But then, of course, there's tons, other stuff depending on area, region, time of the year, etc. But these three is the framework and foundation of a Balochistan khana.
That's right. I mean, I was surprised at reading about the variety of breads. I wasn't aware of that before. You mentioned kak. Kak sounds like cake almost, which is a food staple. Which one was your favorite? Do you have a favorite?
No, I can't say I have a favorite, but LANDHI, I made LANDHI, and I made LANDHI in Qazi house after a generation. So for me, it was a very emotional moment to continue the tradition from great-grandfather's time. So that sense of link where every generation made LANDHI and I continued it for my generation was very important for me. And we used the same, outhouse, where LANDHI hung in Qazi house. So it was very important and very special. So in that sense, LANDHI was something I cherish.
And what's interesting is that you mentioned how in terms of seasoning, it's very simple, like salt. So the quality of the meat, I presume, is very good. Throughout the districts you were traveling through.
Best in the world, hands down.
So, Nilofer, you write about the connection between also bread making, ancient bread making techniques, and when you went to MEHRGARH in Bolan, the connection between ancient bread making, how people have continued to make it in that same way as their ancestors did. But then at the same time, there's a sense of awareness and also a sense of not owning your identity. Can you explain that?
Two different things. MEHRGARH, as some of you may know or may not know, is the seat of the most ancient civilization in the subcontinent.
Neolithic.
In the subcontinent. We don't know about it, the world doesn't know about it, it is rarely written about, but it exists. And this is also the place where the first time humankind, where you had Neolithic man settle down and started agriculture, where from nomadic they decided to settle down. And so in that process of settling down and growing wheat, for example, they also began the first known to man bread making. And so that recipe and that methodology of making bread from wheat, grinding it, mixing, a flour into a paste, and then baking it without any containers, any utensils, because they hadn't invented utensils yet. That method is still done to make kak. So kak is the most ancient form of bread making and a staple in Balochistan. Think about that.
It's fascinating. So during your travels, you also mentioned, like the topography, landscape. You talk also about marhor, this wild goat which you saw, I think, in that area as well. Can you just mention like something about the status of markhors? Are they endangered? How are they being treated?
Markhor is actually the Pakistani national animal. I didn't know that. I realized, and we associate the markhor with the chitrali, wild goat, which is an endangered species. But we also have a Suleimani markhor, which roams the mountains of Balochistan, and I went to a reserve maintained by Sardar Jogazai, Nawab Jogazai, in Killa Saifullah area. And so I did see some markhor, and unfortunately or fortunately, they are hunted, like for $500,000 a head. And they say that provides funds for, the community, etc. But it's an endangered species, and we do have reserves of them managed by local,
Wildlife.
Yeah, wildlife, but also local landlords as well. So I think there's a lot of parallel, in terms of the endangered markhor and lots of things in Balochistan. But that was something I didn't know, because the Chitrali cap has, a markhor feather, and the horn. So you associate it somehow with Chitral, but we also have them in Balochistan and indigenous ones.
Very interesting. So given the social structure and, conservative society, how were you able to access places you went to, homes and other places, and also in terms of the language?
Well, Nino magic, of course. That goes without saying. Who's going to say no to me? But no, that aside, we live in a very hospitable country, and we have 2 degrees of separation, 3 degrees of separation. I cannot thank enough the Jogazai families, where we go back, I don't know how many generations, and they open their doors and hearts and hearts, for me. And the last time they met me was, I think I was a child.
Right.
So, and similarly, like the Khan of Kalat and Kalat, again, I've never met them, but we have family connections. And so, they were very kind. They came from Karachi, and, opened their doors, etc. But in many parts of Balochistan, through my development exposure and connections, BRSP, NRSP, 2 degrees of separation, friends who are, Pushtun, Baloch, that's how you make the effort, and you have many conversations, you do a lot of research, you figure out topography, agriculture, and understand the area, and so language-wise, I understand Pashto, have no idea about Bravi and Balochi, so I always had someone who would interpret and who was a local, because naturally we're entering into very private spaces, and Bilal, who was with me through a lot of the journey, my editor, for Pakistan on a Plate, and who's acknowledged in the book, he's done tremendous work with me. And so many places, men are not allowed, but they would allow because of trust. Everything is about trust building, And in many instances, they thought that, I was coming for a project. I'm going to give them income, or I'm going to be giving them health, education, development interventions. But after many days and many hours, they realized, no. She really is only interested in food. She's only asking me about, what did your grandmother cook? What do you cook? Where do you cook? Can you show me about this? What is the ingredient about? Etc. And I think it was a revelation on both sides. They have no value for what they are doing and what they are holding as a reservoir of our history and heritage. So it was fascinating. I'm learning different aspects. They are realizing that this woman from urban areas is actually interested in what we do as a staple, or what we cook for every day, or for an occasion, or for a death, or for a festival. And so it was a basically learning by doing,
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I was both impressed and amused at how you were able to access, their kitchens even. You went in there making bread, you went assisted in making LANDHI. I mean, that must have been a first for both sides, And I also like how your book, it's told in a very sort of storytelling sort of format, which makes it both very engaging, and it's also part humorous in some ways as well. There's factual information, it's very anecdotal, it's full of history, even ecology. I mean, what genre would you give it? Like, in your opinion, does it belong into a particular genre?
No, I'm food mapping Pakistan. Food mapping is, I suppose, a sector where you are using food as a leitmotif for other things. And so I'm exploring our culture, our heritage, our history, our identity through food. So to go back to the very first question, what we have in the public space is not the sum total of who we are as a people, as a nation, and certainly not what you eat. A lot of it is invisible for a whole variety of reasons. And I have chosen to use my energies to document for our future, our culinary heritage. I leave the rest to others.
So Nilofer, were there any surprises that you came across? I mean, I'm sure there must have been. I found some surprises by reading some of your, most of your book, actually all of it. I finished it last night, 217 pages of it. Were there any surprises that you came across with regards to the food or history or culture? Can you just sort of give us an example? I have something to say. One of them was how they discovered water in very parched areas. They would, they have something called, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, bardasht or whatever. Bardasht, it is the shoulder bone of a goat. That is how they discover water in an area. So, we can't underestimate the power of local knowledge. And I found that really riveting. And they weren't even joking, but she thought they were pulling her leg.
Yeah, that's true.
And they weren't. And what was interesting was, again, surprise, was it a village in Gwadar that you went to where, suddenly there was no electricity, and then you found out that the electricity grid was coming from Iran, not from Pakistan.
Yes, the supply line for Gwadar comes from Iran. The economic dependence of Gwadar with our neighbor is enormous. They are closer linked to Oman and Iran than Quetta.
I have to say, the photographs in this book are just riveting. They made me feel as if I was back in Balochistan. So who gets the credit for these amazing photographs?
Me, Bilal.
Okay. Yeah, they really sort of took me back to my time when I did some field work there when I was doing my master's. So yeah, I mean, there's so much in your book. I think it's a real service which you've done.
Thank you. Thank you.